If they're calming and you go right in, you're really setting yourself back like 100 spaces.
Welcome to Transforming the Toddler Years, a Core 4 parenting podcast for conscious, cycle-breaking parents ready to turn toddler tantrums into teachable moments. Hi, I'm Cara Tyrrell, a lifetime lover of littles, mom to 2 grown and flown girls, and an early childhood educator. Through the show, I teach you my collaborative parenting methodology for nurturing your little human's mind, body, and spirit. Because how you connect and collaborate in the first 5 years is how you raise happy, healthy kids who grow into the best version of themselves and find true success in school and life. Welcome back to the show, Toddler Tribe. Today, I bring Jessica, the sleep consultant, back to talk to you again. Last time she was here, we just couldn't fit it all in one episode. And I had some really burning questions about lovies, moving from crib to toddler bed, what happens when they can get out of the room by themselves, and so much more. So I'm really excited to bring her back and share her with you for another episode on how to raise kids who can fall asleep by themselves, fall back to sleep by themselves when they wake up in the night, be well rested, happy, and healthy. Jessica, welcome back to the show. Last time you were with us, you dropped so much knowledge and some out-of-the-box thinking about sleep for littles and bigs.
Thank you so much. That was so much fun. I'm excited to be back.
I'm going to dive right in because when we left off, I just had a whole boatload of questions that I had written down. You had talked right at the end of that episode about lovies, and I'm a huge fan of lovies. One of the things that I recommend parents do from the day their baby's born is to hold them with the lovey in between on their chest. So it starts to be the sensory representation of that sleep down, or as you say, sleep coming on, and also absorbs a little bit of that mama or daddy smell. What is your favorite thing about lovies and their transitory nature for sleep?
I just think they give so much autonomy to the child, and it's such a great transitional piece to kind of, and I say that all the time too, is when you're introducing them, you almost feel like you're forcing it, because I'll hear so many times, oh, my child doesn't like it, or they don't want them. And I'm always like, we've got to repeat and reintroduce and build that feeling of how they feel, like you said, and then who they're with. And then also that condition, that pattern that I am calm, or I am going to sleep at this time, and this texture, this smell, this something to hold is right here with me. So I love that for development.
So you are also, for listeners who haven't yet to listen to your initial episode, if you haven't, hit pause, go listen to that one, come back here. We'll be here waiting for you. You're also an early childhood development expert. You studied in that realm and you worked in the 0 to 3 space. What does autonomy do for little people when it comes to the development of an identity, that self-skill? And more importantly, my question is really like, a lot of kids use their beds. They've transitioned to a toddler bed. A lot of them use their beds and their lovies as their safe space when they're having a major meltdown. They've got to run in. They like to rub their thing. How are we setting them up for growth and success in self-soothing when it's not related to sleep?
We're just building that confidence, and that they can trust themselves and they don't feel helpless. I think sometimes I'm really resistant to use that word sometimes, because I really want to encourage parents. But sometimes when we're doing all the work for a child and we're doing all the soothing, we're teaching the child they can't do it without them. and then therefore they are helpless. So I will often hear, well, you will start with a sleep situation, but then it's their child is clingy all day and, has a hard time separating and coming back, when needed, or separating and going to school or daycare. And that's uncomfortable for them because they're using the parent or that person as the soother and they don't trust themselves. They think they can't calm, or, I'm oversimplifying, but they can't calm, or they can't fall asleep, or they can't feel better without that person, versus giving them that gift, that confidence that you have in them, and slowly dripping it out in a non-overwhelming way that they can feel. It's the same thing that I use with my sleep jobs. I'm so proud of you for taking care of your body and resting your body. And I heard you wake up in the night, but you worked really hard to wait for sleep to come back on and to use your skills, or to snuggle your lovey. And beaming. Children are they're so proud of themselves. And that's who you have in the world, is yourself. You've got to trust it from an early age.
And that takes an adult showing you that they trust you.
Mm-hmm.
Quick question. Do you subscribe to the Core 4 Connector? That is our weekly newsletter. Drops into your inbox every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just a great way to start the week. Reconnect with the parent, the educator, the nanny, the adult you want to be in your toddler's life. It's easy, quick, and free to sign up. Just use the link in the show notes and you will get all the links that are from the last week's podcasts, just in case they got by you. And you say, oh, that's the one I wanted to listen to. Right. Easy, efficient. That's my goal, is to always provide value for you while keeping your life as simple as possible. Sign up for the Core 4 Connector today. So something else that occurred to me, because you had talked about how kids, when they grow older, right, they hit different learning leaps, but they're also needing different amounts of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I hear a lot from parents is that, oh, my child naps no problem at childcare or at school, but on the weekends at home with us, we don't nap anymore. They don't do it here.
Mm-hmm.
Is there really an on-off switch to our sleep needs between environments, or is this maybe just something that parents have a belief system around?
I think the real question in that for that family is, what are the routines around nap at school? And often they're super consistent. And children and adults thrive on the routine, knowing what's next. And so their child knows what's next because everyone's doing it and it's exactly the same each day. And then obviously they're going to feel safer at home. And so they're going to test more in those kind of things. But depending on the age, if they're 18 months or 24 months and they're not napping on the weekend, do you have a consistent routine? Because it's not consistent for you during the weekdays. And a lot of parents also say they try to keep the time the same as it is at daycare. And as they get older, like 2.5, usually they're not tired at 12 or 12:30 at home on the weekends. So they're much more resistant because they're not sleepy. So it's back to that communication. Does your child look tired? Or are you just doing it on the time on the clock just to check?
Mm-hmm.
So for families that want to continue with a quiet time or a nap time on the weekend, I would say reflect on those routines and what boundaries you have set up for naps.
Yeah, because honestly, a childcare environment has a bit of social peer pressure built into it.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone around you is laying down, I guess, even though I don't feel like it, I will.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes their body brings on sleep and sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
So, at home, you're individualized and this is all about you in that moment.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. You have so much to share. One of the things I know that we agree on is that crying is communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And the infants, they communicate through crying, and it's a very specific cry or specific need. Crying does not necessarily mean distress or hunger when your kids have reached a different age bracket.
Mm-hmm.
So how should parents approach this? Because the kids are going to try lots of different things and give lots of different reasons.
Yes. I think it's definitely back to that individual child. Some children have a strong voice, I like to say. They cry louder than a sibling or the next door neighbor or the child down the street. And parents are different. They can tolerate different pitches of noises and things like that. So if we've got an older toddler and they start throwing a fit at bedtime or crying out of the blue, is there something really wrong that you need to address? Or is it just not their favorite? Or is there a fear? Or, because I think a lot of times today we feel like every bedtime is supposed to be, our job as a parent is to get our child calm and ready for sleep, before you leave the room. And I'm like, guys, 365 days a year, you cannot have a perfect bedtime. Sometimes, especially 18 months, those rough toddler years, when you know that your child is tired, they cannot attend to redirection and you can't do this and say sorry and let's go out and start over. And, they're done and they need you to draw the line, and it may feel uncomfortable to you, but I can tell your body is very tired and it's time for rest. So I'm going to say goodnight, and I will see you in the morning for snuggles on the couch or to read that book we didn't read or whatever. And then you leave the room because you're removing the stimulus. If we've got an overstimulated, overtired toddler who's crying and that's what's going on, don't continue to engage. That's when you get the 2-hour, bedtime and then super overtired cycle. And then you become frustrated and you lose your cool.
Right. All right, let's ask the big question.
Uh-oh.
What about mom's gone in, she did the thing, it's done, child's upset, she leaves. Okay. 10 minutes later, dad can't take it, and dad goes in. Because the child is smart enough to know mom's holding her boundary. She did it yesterday. She did it the day before. Darn it. Why don't I see if yelling for the other one does anything? How far backwards do people set themselves by doing that? I always say when we do that, we take 5 steps back to then move 2 steps forward again, right? Where does this, even if dad does have to go in because it's just escalating and he's a different person,
right?
What should he say to back up what mom did and then try to calm and leave again?
Yes, it's very tricky.
It's very tricky.
And so a couple thoughts is, number one, when dad is thinking about going in, what were the words that were used? Does he know what mom said? And the last couple nights, if this is recurring, or the parents' actions matching the words that they have given the child. And just to think about, is that fair? Are you confusing the child more by not matching your actions versus the expectation? So that's just something he can still feel uncomfortable and he can still go in. That's just some thinking.
Yeah.
And then your second question of, if he needs to go in. So depending on how long it has been, and it's tricky to do this with a toddler, but one option he could do to really change the game if they haven't tried it before is they could do a reset. So if he is just uncomfortable and he wants to give it a go, he could go in, take the toddler out of the room, bring it into a calm, quiet room in the house. Lamps down low, no screens, we're talking very quietly. And you bring the child out. You can hold, and you're not saying a lot when you get there. You walk in and you just kind of pause and assess. You don't immediately go to them, pick them up, put them in bed, or, something like that. You're just standing at the door, assessing, and then you're saying, it's nighttime. It's time to rest your body. Let's do a reset, and then bring them out for a few minutes. Sit in the dark room and just sit with them. Don't engage with them. Mm-hmm. But that way the dad feels like he can follow through what is in his gut. He can observe the child. Does the child immediately go and get a toy? Is the child immediately laughing, Daddy? Is there something else wrong? Or do they, throw up or have, any of those things? But just 3 to 5 minutes of almost like a sensory reset in a different room. Sit quietly, but the dad is not talking. The dad is being the calm, unemotional robot, matter of fact, letting the child come down from the sensory space. And the second the child's crawling in their lap and laying down or going to get toys, it's okay. Reset is over. We're calm. We're going to go back to the room. I'm going to give you a hug and say their goodnight statement again, and then leave the room quickly, not restarting the bedtime routine. Yeah. I use that more with infants, but there's occasional chances where it's like worst case scenario and the parents just need something else besides sitting in the room, which is then opening another can of worms. So I'm just tossing that out for someone to consider. And then I think after dad goes in, if he sees the same pattern, like that didn't work, or there was nothing really wrong, or he didn't need me, then it's coming back to mom and talking about it. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I like to say is if the child is truly in a protest cry, this is not my favorite, I don't like it, I don't want to go to bed, there's usually a pattern to that cry. And I don't know if you talk to your families about this, but if you're looking at the clock, have you given them enough time to kind of work through their problem solving and get distracted with a toy or a lovey and maybe, and they're calmer and they're at the valley of that peak cry? Then it's like, hey, can y'all look at each other and say, let's give them 5 more minutes? Because if they're calming and you go right in, you're really setting yourself back like 100 spaces. Yes. So, and that's really comforting to parents too, because if they can see that 3-second, 10-second, 30-second pause lengthen, they're like, okay, I'll give it 3 more minutes, or I'll, Yeah. And usually that's just the child just getting out all of their overstimulation and getting to a point where they can settle themselves.
That is so helpful. I know I've worked with so many families who say, I'm just addicted to toddler TV, right? They're just sitting there looking at the monitor and it's like their evening show. But watching the pattern, that is such a fantastic.
And reminding yourself they can do, that sleep. They can do it. They have done it in the past. They have the capacity. Yeah. Back to your key is mindset is that if you're talking around saying my kid's a bad sleeper, then.
Right. Yeah. Then they believe that to be true. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite stories of all time was this family, and their daughter is just such a fireball. I love her so much. And she would definitely show she was not into it. And then she would turn to her lovey and she would say, I am so mad right now. And she would explain to her lovey all the reasons she was mad about the fact that she had to go to sleep. And it was the best. And that's when toddler TV is super fun.
Getting those emotions out, letting them share their frustrations that their favorite thing is not happening. Share their thoughts, get them out. You're not quieting their voice and you're not continuing to go in over and over and over and stimulate. And you don't realize you're working backwards. You're actually keeping them awake instead of giving them space to wind down.
Okay. So we've talked about the going in. What about the one where they can get out?
Well, unpopular opinion.
Love it.
Probably. But especially when we're going from a crib to a bed. You're going from a confined space where your child is sleeping successfully, has a routine, and is comfortable. Okay. Why in today's society are we told as parents to go from I looked it up one time, the square footage of the crib to your 3,000 square foot house, to your 1,900 square foot house, to your 1,100 square foot apartment? Why does that make sense for a little person's brain? So I always say, if you're thinking of the transition, I use the sleep jobs, and then I think about the door. How do you feel about the door? And what if you childproofed it to keep them safe? They're not in the toilet. They're not getting in the snack bar. You're setting them up for success. It's a transition, right? We talked about that in the last episode. You're setting them up in small baby steps to go from the crib to their room as the new crib with a boundary, right? I feel like it's overwhelming to go from the crib to, oh, I hear daddy just got home, or, oh, mommy is in the bathroom. I'm going to go check on her, or baby sister started crying. I can help, and then it matches the sleep jobs of you stay in your room all night long until the light comes on, the sun comes up, or parent comes in. And then when they're successful with that, it's not childproof, but it's closed. And they know the expectation that they're supposed to stay in there and call if they have an emergency, or whatever your family rule is. But they can get out to go to the bathroom when they're older, and the expectation is they go right back in their room and wait for sleep to come on again.
Yes. I mean, a lot of families, the decision to move to a toddler bed is sibling induced, right? They don't want to buy another crib. And so I love this. I really do. I like the child-led, the brain-led, the safety-led. We know kids like small spaces. Oh. They feel really cozy in small spaces. When my daughter was little, she could climb out, and okay, that's the time. But instead of going straight to a toddler bed, I put one of those mini tents, those kid tents in her bedroom, and put the mattress in the tent. She loved it.
Oh, yeah.
It just felt so safe.
Cocoon.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can get creative with this.
Yes.
The key you're telling us is conversation, communication, setting reasonable expectations, and holding those boundaries when they push back. We all know it. It can be really tricky stuff to implement on a daily basis if we're feeling that sleep deprivation for ourselves. And that's where people come in as support systems. That's what your company exists for. So is there anything else that you think that, based on everything we've talked about, just has to be said?
Well, just what you've said just now made me think of the big picture. And I think it's so hard when you're in the trenches. I had twins, and my oldest was 3.5 years older. You're in the minutia, little minute by minute, to see the big picture. And today, 70% of high schoolers do not get the minimum amount of sleep.
Yikes.
50% of middle schoolers don't get enough sleep. So when we're seeing these rise in our young adults after COVID and all these things in mental health, it's how do you want your children to take care of their bodies at 11, 13, 15, 17, and when they launch into the world? Do you want them to be resilient? Do you want them to understand rest and prioritize it, or not? And so some of these things can be, hard decisions when they're little, but you don't realize when you start at prioritizing sleep from a young age for yourself and your children and your whole family, then you're raising well-rested kiddos that can change the world. So that is the mission of the Better Sleep Council, is that everyone gets a good night's sleep and you can wake feeling refreshed and energized. So that just made me think of, older kids and bringing it back, since we both have some of those older ones.
We do.
The tinies.
I love it. And what's really funny is I mean, you have to follow your child to some degree, right? I have one who showed from very early ages she was a night owl. Mm-hmm. And I have one who showed from very early ages she earned the title farmer's daughter legitimately. Mm-hmm. 4 a.m., crack of dawn. That is when that child woke up. Mm-hmm. And no amount of fussing around did anything with it. She still does. Mm-hmm. She is a 19-year-old who still by choice has herself in bed, calming to get sleep on by 8:30 at night, and she's up at 4.
She's reverse engineered her sleep needs to make sure that she gets the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep, of connected, silent sleep a night. And so kudos to her. Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I am struggling with sleep now. And that's a whole different story, right? Yes. That's age-based, that's hormone change. But what's interesting about it is it ties directly into what you just said, because it forces us at a middle age to now pay attention and to design our sleep environment differently and to choose different sleep habits and to find tools and resources that we didn't need before. And it's so interesting. Well, the world just kind of loops it back around for you and says, don't worry, you get to do this too.
So true. So true.
All right. Well, for everybody out there, regardless of the age and the stage that your child is at, know that transition is part of the deal, but that everybody can follow their sleep routines and get a good night's sleep. And Jessica, will you remind everyone how they can get a hold of you if they need some support?
Yes. If you're wondering if your child is getting enough sleep, I have a free guide on my website called Sleep Milestones. You can access that on www.sleephappyconsulting.com, which I'll know is going to be in the show notes. And I also, if you ever want to do a sleep audit because you're waking up grumpy or your children are waking up grumpy, then I do offer a free call to talk about your sleep.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again. Having you back, it was such a joy. I just feel such synergy and that great energy that we have, because we both know that happy, healthy, rested kids are kids who learn, and kids who learn are kids who make impact. And so that's what we're doing.
Yes, so much.
All right, everyone. Until our next episode, you know what to do. Stay mindful and proactive as we transform the toddler years.